country, city, community are all constructs that we are part of. They could be viewed as concentric circles, and for the sake of convenience, one may call it collectively society. And oftentimes, these concentric circles, individually, separately, or oftentimes together, assert certain pressures on us that are a combination of conditioning, of stereotypes, prejudices, and long established status quos. We encounter a raft of challenging situations that we sort of navigate either consciously or unconsciously, but they're very much there and they very much present themselves and make life, which is admittedly very beautiful, a little more challenging to face. The reason I'm sharing this simply is because the individual joining us today is somebody who is and therefore will come across as supremely confident, outspoken, unabashed, but I suspect has had a journey of her own where she has been at the receiving end of many of these pressures that I referred to just now. Uh, Having said that, when we see any individual, and I must say, particularly a woman, emerge triumphant and, um, in a sense, empowered, it is in turn very, very empowering. And so we're very, very lucky and privileged that Radhika Dudejaa is joining us. You may know her from her fiercely outspoken podcast, and she's somebody who wears and has worn multiple hats, which is also another sort of fact about her that we at Driveway Devi really admire, because all of us individuals are in fact multifaceted. And those few of us who choose not to be shoehorned into a tiny little box with a label by society probably end up having a more interesting life. So, we're going to talk about lots of things with Radhika. We're calling this session Journey of Actualization. Radhika, welcome and thank you so much for making time in the midst of lots that's going on.
Thank you so much, Karthik. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Well, the topic we're going to discuss is something I'm very, very passionate about. That's no secret. So, yes, very excited. And yes,
I want to link this whole introduction of mine and the pressures that I spoke of to this very, very outspoken self that we see on your podcast, especially that being the most sort of public face of what you're doing. Where does this courage and conviction you think come from? Was it always there? Or is it something that you've consciously worked on?
well, in all honesty, it's always been there. There's no other way I know. But oftentimes I was asked to dim that light and dim that, because it was like brutal honesty, right? So very often I was asked to sober down a little, maybe, for the lack of a better word. But I refuse to do that. Be politer for sure. Maybe slightly more diplomatic sometimes, but there's no other way I know, and I always want to be this way. And yeah, I mean, I think what the one thing that is allowed me to stay the same despite all that the world had to say around me was authenticity. When you really believe in your opinions and in yourself and you operate from a place of authenticity, it just becomes easier.
I love your answer, and I have a little bit of a theory about this. There is a gagging instinct that we human beings have, where the moment a child is born, the child's instinct is to howl uncontrollably, and our instinct or tendency is to try our level best to make the child shut up. So I really believe that this gagging and censorship propensity begins from right there. And it's so terribly tragic and ironic because as we grow older and hopefully wiser, instead of becoming more and more open with and about our opinions and perceptions, we become more and more censored. So it's so refreshing and empowering to see you the way you are. Talk a little bit about some of your other pursuits, sort of in your own words. I'd love for everyone to know.
Sure. So, I've always had one foot in fashion and the other in academics. I grew up loving garments. I was always a rather stylish kid, but I was also very focused in studies. And I had a love for numbers. Math was one of my favorite subjects always. And yeah, so I collided both the worlds. I studied BCom honors from Delhi University. That was my graduation. After that, I went on to do masters in fashion management from the fashion capital, which is Milan. Alongside college, I also did a diploma in design from NIFT just for the sake of it because I wanted to learn more about fashion. And after my master's, I worked in the fashion retail industry for 5 years. And last year, I was given the opportunity to host a podcast for IDEWA, which is the South Delhi Girls podcast, which is a women-centric podcast. And that's a dream. That's been a dream. And yeah, and now I've recently quit my journey to pursue entrepreneurship, and that's that.
Wonderful. Now, you mentioned a very interesting thing, which is, by your own admission and words, you collided these two worlds, which are seemingly dichotomous to us. You know,
Hmm.
whichever way you look at it, you can say left brain, right brain, you can say business, academics, scholastic on one end, and fashion on the other. And very often, again, we put those kinds of individuals in very, very separate and distinct brackets and in those narrow lines. Is that a dichotomy that was unsettling to other people?
Well, I just think that people don't know enough about these things. So I don't know about unsettling or not, but it was definitely a little difficult for them to understand because I always wanted to become a buyer. So when I was in college, I did multiple internships I did modeling, I did fashion blogging, and I interned in FMCGs like Reckitt Benckiser, and I also interned in export houses, buying houses. So when I was doing these internships particularly, because I was very sure that I don't want to be like on the very creative end of fashion also, making sketches and all of that, but at the same time, I wanted to be in fashion but blend my commerce acumen with it. And then I got to know about this term called the fashion, like there's a fashion buyer. Okay, I was
Sure.
like, okay, fine. And the moment I learned more about it, I was like, I want to be a fashion buyer. And most often when I would tell people what I am and what I do, everybody like, but what do you do exactly? So, well, for the layman, if you watch Friends, Rachel Green was a buyer for Ralph Lauren. Uh, yeah, so I just feel that people don't know enough about it. Fashion is a huge world. It's a billion-dollar industry. We mostly associate fashion with fabrics and with embroideries and with factories, but that's literally just one end of it. Because product for any business is just one piece. Very important, but still one piece. Then comes marketing, then comes sales, operations, and then comes merchandising. So yes, fashion too has very, very commercial departments in it, which require the individual to have acumen for both fashion and commerce. So yes, these kind of fields exist.
Now, I would have probably asked you this later in our conversation, but it's come up in context. Uh, I think it's fair to say that broadly speaking, there is a truth about there being certain limitations and limits to how much women can progress in the big bad corporate world. Glass ceilings, pay disparity, etc. And then, of course, every sector or industry has its own peculiarities and sort of unwritten norms by which it functions. Because you have worked in such a broad spectrum of organizations, from MNCs to FMCG, fashion. What has your experience been in a very, very general sense? Have you observed that by and large, because of your gender, you've been at an advantage or at a disadvantage?
So, gender parity is real. And well, unfortunately, it's not just limited to India. One would think it's just in India because of the mindset we have in the patriarchal society we live in, but it's actually a global issue. In fact, the other day I read that it's been stalled. So gender progress and gender equality, the progress we've been trying to make in terms of gender equality in the corporate world has been stalled for a bit. I think in the last 2 years it has moved only zero point 0.2 points up from 30.6%. So that is
In
real.
fact, if I can quickly come in here, I completely agree that it's a global phenomenon because one has enough examples, in fact, where India ranks better, particularly in terms of maternity, etc., as compared to a lot of other countries.
Yeah. So it is a huge issue, whether or not people like to believe it. Like, I do promote feminism a lot, even on my personal social media, and I have a lot of people coming and saying, यार 2025 में कौन सी बातें कर रहे हो आप अब तो लड़कियों को ज्यादा मिल रहा है even the law prefers women more, favors women more, but that's not true. The law has started to favor women more because it was the need of the hour, and even then women do not get the lives they deserve, and they do not get that kind of equality, and it is still an issue. Entry level, still women and men are treated equally, but even if you look at interviews, a man is never asked when does he plan a family, whether or not he has any plans to get married or have babies, because they
Because
are
it's
considered.
assumed it'll have no bearing on anything.
Exactly, that married or not, because the man has no responsibilities at home whatsoever. And even corporates, they see, I think if I were in HR and if I had to prove something to my company, even I would probably think from that lens. Because even society, what we fail to understand is we go ahead and blame the corporates. But even our society is to be blamed. Of course, a money making corporate would want an employee that will give more hours. And in our case, it happens to be men, because at home they have no responsibility. They don't have to feed the kid, they don't have to change the kids' diapers or whatever. And when it comes to women, even if they're working, they are required to assume roles at the house as well. So women, for sure, men are preferred more. The questioning is very different for men and women. And even if at entry level, even if women are considered just to even maintain that sex ratio, for the sake of it, when it comes to managerial roles and beyond, you'll see women do not do as well as men. It's not because women don't have the knowledge. In fact, in certain, like, women have proven to be more emotionally intelligent and
Hmm.
responsible. Yet somehow men make the cut and women don't, because, well, there is a bias. Speaking of me, uh, I would just say that as a woman who looks a certain way and has always been fashionable, I wasn't taken very seriously always, and I had to really work very hard to be taken seriously, because somehow people still have this notion that beauty and brains cannot coexist. And if a woman is beautiful, she's self-centered and she has to be dumb. And if a person is, well, whatever, average looking in relative terms, they probably will be more sincere in what they do, which is, I believe, ridiculous. And when it comes to gender, I do believe that in my later years of my corporate life, I had to work with some traditional men who came from T2, T3 cities, and their conditioning is very different. So in
I'm
that
not
case,
used to you saying words like traditional. It's so polite and euphemistic.
well, I told you I'm trying to be polite now these days.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, so traditional Lala people
Hmm. Hmm.
from T2, T3 cities
Sure.
who have very different
Yeah.
conditioning. So, they're used to women saying Hanji and OKG, and if they've said something, it goes. And I, being whatever at my job, trying to really I'd keep my point forward that no, I don't think this is how it should be done. This is not good for the business. So they're not used to that, and they take offense. And of course, that plus my straightforward nature definitely clash some egos. So I faced that.
But on a perfectly sincere note, and very quickly, I'd like to narrate this incident. So, when my wife and I were living back in Bombay, and we were sort of actively working in the media, and most of our work used to be in non-fiction lifestyle television, we had gone to a channel which will remain unnamed to pitch a new show. And so there were four of us guys, and my wife was along because actually she's the one who had the maximum experience, particularly in the specific niche that we were pitching. And the channel head was a lady, and she was the most obnoxious human being, over abrasive and clearly overcompensating because of the gender reality of it, and wanting to sort of overimpose her authority and prove that, oh my god, I'm the man, uh, pun intended. And so she made some extremely derogatory and politically incorrect remarks. Have you also encountered, even if you didn't do it to an extent yourself, have you encountered other women who have sort of tried to quote unquote be or seem like men?
I have a theory. I don't know if I'm right or wrong about it, but I do have a theory. I very strongly believe it. So, it is no surprise that female bosses are stricter than male bosses, and male bosses are preferred any day over female bosses. That's the reality. One reason behind it is that women in general are more serious than men, and they like to be more responsible. They're like, don't do this and don't do that. Even at home,
Hmm.
women are
Hmm.
more
Yeah,
strict and more
yeah.
very
They're the bad cop.
particular.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, they're always the bad cop.
Hmm.
So one is that, but other I feel is that somehow because women have to go through so much to prove themselves or to even get to a certain point
Sure.
at any given day, if a man and a woman are at a managerial role, the woman, and given their other circumstances were pretty similar, the woman probably worked double as
Double,
hard
at least. Yes. Yeah.
as the man did to be where she is.
Hmm.
And somehow in that whole process, they become that, there's a resentment, and there's a that sense of bitterness that they develop, that I've worked hard to be here and you better behave with me because I've earned this. And also sometimes they take it out on people around them without knowing, because life has a way of making you bitter also. Sometimes our bad experiences shape us into better human beings, के चलो मेरे साथ हुआ, मेरा मैं ऐसा किसी और के साथ ना करूं, right? But most often ऐसा नहीं होता है, although we want to be that person. But sometimes, when these kind of things happen, we become bitter without even knowing it, and then we start to take out all of that on the people around us. So this is my theory.
But that
And
makes a lot of sense, because what you're essentially saying is that your life experience and lived experience makes you a certain way. And that makes perfect sense. I used to wonder when I was very young that my father in the evening with his drink listens to such beautiful Urdu poetry. And then when he loses his shit, he says the most ganda galis I'd ever heard. Like half of them I couldn't even figure out. And it was a mystery to me until it dawned on me that he had become that way because his entire working life he had dealt with daily wage laborers at his factory. So, yeah, it is very much, I mean, it's bound to influence you.
we are a product of our environment. I don't know this quote. I don't know who said it. That your life, you are the average of the five people you spend most of your time with, and that is very true. So, like it or not, you pick up things around you, from around you, and whatever you go through, it shapes you as a person. Of course, you can either choose to be on the kinder side or the other side. But most often, without knowing, unwillingly, we go on to the other side where we ourselves become a bitter person and we start to take that out. And I think that is the case with women in senior positions.
Makes sense. Final couple of questions. I promise I won't keep you long. I want to take you back a little bit. And, obviously, it goes without saying that I don't want you to have to speak about anything personal or private you don't wish to. I do, however, know, as you shared with me earlier, that there was a certain point in history and time in your family post partition, etc., where really the whole lot of you had to, in a sense, restart life from scratch. Um, Having grown up in that kind of environment, uh, did it have any impact on you, positive or negative?
Um, it was definitely positive because as a third generation since the partition, I did not face the brunt directly. So I was fortunate that way. Uh, Both my maternal and paternal grandparents, they had to come to India. They were based in Pakistan. They came from very wealthy families, but of course, when they came here, they lost everything, their wealth, their identity, even their families, and they were completely on road. And my mother's great grandmother used to sew clothes in Lal Killa. That's where the refugees were, and sent her two very young daughters to school.
Hmm.
She did not make them succumb to child labor. She took all the responsibility on herself because even back then she was such a visionary woman and so forward for her time. She sent both her girls to school. She did not marry. And
That's
her
remarkable.
Yeah, and she made sure that both her daughters were well educated. Both of them went on to take on government jobs later in life, and her only dream was to have her own house, which she ended up building a four-story building with in south of Delhi without any man backing her. So, and when it comes to my paternal grandfather, when he came here, he came here with his brothers, and of whatever little they had, they wanted to keep them to themselves. So he, being the youngest brother, was outcasted. So again, he was also on his own completely, and he was fairly young. So he had to start as a laborer because what else do you do with no education,
Hmm.
with nothing with you? And yeah, so he also worked terribly hard when all his peers would spend all their money away in gambling and drinking. He made sure to send all his kids to school. And his also lifelong dream was to have his own house because he was outcasted from the entire little bit of property that they had here. And yeah, so because when you have nothing, the only thing that you crave for is security. And in that case, it was a roof over their heads. So
Hmm.
he
I mean,
also,
that is something that I think a lot of us Indians still
yeah,
identify as a huge source of permanence,
oh,
security, etc.
right. Because when you've seen so much instability in your life, what is that one thing that gives you stability? A stable house, a roof over your head, one place that you can call home. So yeah, he invoked his entire life to build that one house, and he did. He also educated his kids. And my father, who went to a government school, learned ABCD in the fifth grade. Went on to work in the biggest FMCG of the world, that is Nestle, and he retired as capital expenditure head
Wow.
at 16. So I think we're a family of survival, but what our story tells us that of it's of exponential growth, I believe, and that is something that I've imbibed from my I probably genetically, and also seeing and hearing all of these stories. Yeah, so we're a family that believes in surviving, growing, and being very ambitious.
Well,
Where
I'm
other
I'm just delighted to hear that whatever you inherited has been very positive and some absolutely critical qualities and attributes. Because, pardon my French, again, you're being awfully polite and articulate, but to use a very male reference, this ballsiness obviously is in your DNA. So that's wonderful to sort of know and hear. Finally, Radhika, I know that you're at a very interesting crossroads professionally. And again, without spilling the beans on anything, any kind of transition and any point in our lives where it's going to be a milestone and you're at the cusp of something comes again with a whirlwind of emotions and circumstances. There's excitement, there's an adrenaline rush, there's this huge sort of feeling of positivity, but of course there are challenges as well. um, what is your headspace these days, and the times that you must obviously invariably not be in a positive sort of zone, what gets you out of the funk?
So, there's a friend of mine. He's one of the India's top podcasters, and I remember this conversation with him where we were talking about overthinking. And this one time, he just told me that Radhika, overthinking is a product of underdoing, and that line stayed with me. And I'm saying this because there's context. This is the foundation of what I'm going to talk about. And there's also, I think, Jeff Bezos said this or someone else, that real stress comes from not doing what you know you can do. We rarely ever stress about the things that are out of control. As long as we're doing what is in our control, life becomes easier. And yes, every day is very different because, yes, we're a family of survivors and we're a family of really, really bold and brave people who've had to start from the scratch. But we're also a family that has craved stability and security their entire lives. And seeing my father be in a white collar job all his life and doing just fine, there was really no need for me to take this leap. I could have followed the same path. I could have stayed in my job, earned a decent amount of money because there's money in job as well. There's a lot of security, and even if private jobs are very very hectic, you still get those 2 days off where you don't really have to worry about anything. Uh, but I did this because I wanted to. There was a part of me that knew that there's more that needs to be achieved. There are more sides to me that need to be touched and brought out. So I think there was this hunger of exhausting my entire potential because I think knowing that you're capable of more and not doing it is it's very depressing. It's very, very depressing.
Also, I suppose it's not something that you want to have occur to you later in life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I thought it was, of course, they're to each their own, but for me, this was the right time because I'm unmarried. I do not have any home responsibilities. I do not have kids to raise, and I don't have rents to pay. So, in that sense, I was privileged, I'll be honest. And I thought that if not now, then when? The
Mm,
only thing that I lose is my own savings.
mm,
So, I had to go for it. And also because I think this is progression, right? My grandfather did what he had to, which was to build a home. And even if he had to do the lowest quality of work. And then my father had to go one level up and
mm,
do whatever
mm,
he could do,
mm.
which is get a good job,
Yeah,
prove himself,
yeah,
work tirelessly, and reach to the highest, point in the chain.
sure.
And then me as the third generation, I think it's my responsibility to take it up a notch and do the best I can. And also now that we finally have that security and stability where we don't have to worry about rents and water
Sure.
and
Yep.
all of that, why not? But having said that, yes, because I've seen a lot of security around me, this was a fairly bold step. I think it took me 6 months of convincing my own self to take this leap. But what got me going was telling myself that time is running out and you have to do it sooner or later. And while some years of experience is very, very important, because it really helps you get that discipline. It gets you an understanding of how things are done at a better scale. Because when you work in corporate, you get a huge understanding of how everything works. And
Sure.
also because I worked in fashion retail only, and that's the very field that I want to, make my business in.
Yeah.
So it was very, very good. But at the same time, staying there long enough also cripples you,
Hmm.
and it rips you of all the audacity you have because then you're too comfortable. So I thought this was the right step. Every day is a challenge. Some days I feel really good because they're very productive and I feel that everything's going for me. I have a network, I can reach out to people, I'm resourceful. And the other days, you just feel that what did I even do the entire day? Like somehow I was on calls, I was texting, I was on mail, I was on Pinterest, I was doing everything, but did I get anywhere? Because you feel that there is no progression whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think in those days, the only thing that I try to do is not think about the outcome at all. So I'm a big, I read literature a lot, and I am a big fan of remembering and penning down quotes. And there's this another thing that a person who worries before something, worries more than necessary, right? So it's
Hmm.
something like that.
Hmm.
So when the outcome, because what makes you anxious is not कि मैंने क्या किया या अभी क्या हो रहा है. What makes you anxious is होगा,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? It's always the apprehension and the possibility of anything happening in the future
Yeah,
that
worry
really,
is retrospective. Well, it's predictive.
yeah.
Hmm.
Always, always.
Hmm.
So the best thing you can do is not think about it at all. The best thing
Sure.
you can do is remember what is in your control, which is your effort. And somebody who's been a chronic overthinker, I've come a long way, and I remind myself every day that the outcome is not in my control, and I am not going to spend even a minute thinking about it. Of course, there are days I think about it, but then you have to take a U-turn. When you're meditating, your mind goes here and there, and you bring it back to your breathing.
Sure.
Similarly, every day, when your mind wanders here and there, you bring it back कि वो मेरे हाथ में नहीं है, मैं उसके बारे में सोचूंगी भी नहीं. मेरे हाथ में जो is, it's the now and it's the effort, and that's what I'm going to do, and rest all will happen. And of
Well,
course,
I
then
mean,
there are little tricks to stay positive, which is
right.
to read
Well,
positive stuff, to write down.
while you've enumerated on this in a lot of detail with a lot of insight and actually quite philosophically, are there any sort of like I'm looking for stupidly simplistic things like, oh, I listen to music or I go for a run.
Mm. Okay, so I'll tell you one thing. So there's this thing called NLP, which is neuro
Yeah,
linguistic
yeah.
programming, right? So most often, and I read about it, and I've been talking to a cousin who's been doing all of this healing work and all. So we were talking, and we came down to this conclusion that most often जब हम कुछ गलत सोच रहे होते हैं, it's not because उस moment में हमको वो सोचना चाहिए, it's because कभी हमने वो सोचा, and we're very used to feeling those emotions all the time, so we can't stop but feel those emotions even when the circumstances around us do not support that
Yeah.
emotion. If I've grown up feeling victimized, even when I'm in an empowered position, I'm going to feel the victim somehow. And very small ways to change it is like, for example, I have an alarm for every 2 hours,
Hmm.
and I've titled it mood check. So every 2 hours, when the alarm goes, you just ask yourself, what is my mood right now? Is it something I want to be in? If it's not something it's you want to be in, then you quickly remind yourself. For example, you're angry and you want to feel happy. You just close your eyes and you remember that time when you were happy. And basically, it's just recalling all those good times in your life when you felt joy,
Hmm.
happiness, gratitude. And even if that doesn't work, you simply put on music because
Hmm.
that helps.
Hmm.
Otherwise, my go-to tricks are every morning, and this has become a non-negotiable because the one thing that I wanted to gift myself after quitting my corporate life was slow mornings. And every morning after my bed tea, I spend good 20, 30 minutes deep breathing and meditating.
Nice.
And that really sets the tone for my day.
Sure.
Deep breathing is life changing. It's life changing. My dermatologist actually recommended it to me because when I was going through acne, she was like, Radhika, you will not believe all your stress. Um, it produces cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And so, for people listening to this, even for the sake of your hair and skin, you just relax. And deep breathing is life changing. Meditation is great. It's a little intense. So, there are very small ways and very easy ways to meditate also. There's like open YouTube, there's guided meditation. You just have to listen and follow. That's all you have to do. You will not fall asleep because most people fall asleep meditating. There's journaling. Journaling is very impactful. Just penning down your thoughts. And of course, last but not the least is exercise.
Hmm. Hmm. Huh, but
It's scientifically proven
right,
to,
right.
mentally support your well-being.
Absolutely, absolutely. But of all the sort of things that you've said, one is sort of aware that okay, fine, these are things that work. What I find personally very, very significant, and it's such a beautiful tool to employ, is this 2 hour check because essentially you get wrapped up in your own head, right, and you lose all sense of objectivity. So that check in of making yourself self aware and questioning what zone you're in is what will give you the knowledge to then employ any of the other options that you subsequently spoke about. So that to
Mm-hmm.
me is very, very significant in the first place.
See, I think self-awareness is the first step to any change that you want to employ in life. Otherwise, you don't even know there's a change to be made in the first place. So, yes, awareness is very important. And this mood check tool that was introduced to me by somebody else who's in this NLP business has been very impactful. But I do feel that everything else, because even like when you talk about journaling, journaling also helps you become aware of your own emotions. Very often, journaling is confused with manifestation.
Hmm.
Journaling isn't writing down your desires 11 times. That is separate. That is affirmations. That's
Completely
manifestation.
different. Yeah.
Journaling is simply writing down your thoughts, and in that process, you realize what your mind thinks of and what can be changed. And it is a very powerful tool, very, very powerful tool. But, and having said all of these things, I think spirituality is one thing that we often don't talk about. Knowing that there is somebody bigger than you, greater than you, looking after you, and uh, surrendering, because there's a lot of power in surrender, a lot of power. Because when we it's good to feel in control. Of course, there is free will and there is karma. I'm a big karma believer. But just feeling that, okay, you are the karta dharta of your own life can be very, very burdening. Can be very,
Absolutely. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that in my very limited understanding of life and philosophy, there is a lot of liberty in surrender.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, do your best. Nobody's saying just surrender and lie down and everything will come to you.
Sure.
Do your best. But it's a very simple that तुम पैर चलाओ नाव जहां जानी होगी वो ले जाएंगे. So I think that is very, very empowering.
Yeah, I think the way I sort of tend to look at this is that if one is trying to build a home, then there are several cooks in that broth, and I think if we can accept that, and that the fact that it is a collaborative effort, even if you don't want to make a spiritual leap or call into question larger things such as spirituality, religion, etc. If you just go by this very, very fundamental sort of example of whether it's a team sport or whether it's making a movie or whether it's constructing a home, these are all collaborative things, and there is a there is a one's role is finite. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So, I mean, just knowing that your role is finite and there's only so much you can do, and just giving your best and leaving the rest to whatever it is you believe in. And even if you
Precisely.
don't believe in, then, just the world, just leaving it, that's it. That is very empowering. But having said that, I have seen so many people who go to the mandir every day, you know, who also probably sit and try to meditate. They do nam jap, they do everything, but somehow they lose their temper and they'll be very angry and they will be abusive. And sometimes you just look at them and wonder, but all of this for what then?
Yeah, but
So,
you know what, Radhika? Sorry to interrupt, but I
mm,
suspect, and I don't mean to offend anyone by drawing this particular analogy, but it's like one of those situations where, let's say you start going to the gym and initially you run 4 kilometers. There'll come a point where then you don't lose any more weight, or you don't, because your body becomes accustomed to that much. And I think
mhm.
really in a lot of these situations, that might just be it, because it's literally just part of the routine. It's just muscle memory. You're just going through the motions of your day. I don't think there's any deeper meaning or consequence of that temple visit or of that japna or whatever.
Yeah, no, so having said that, I just feel that while you do all of this, intent is very important. That intent to change and be a better person.
Yes.
And when it comes to mental wellness, processing your emotions, you can be doing all of this. But first is that intent to live a happier, better life and be a better person, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. That is A. And B is process everything, because you may have like in my case, I may have the most amazing slow morning. okay, that 1 hour is great. But the moment I step out of my room and I'm with my parents, I'm in the market and I'm juggling with things, it comes crumbling down. And those are the moments I have to remind myself that you did that so that you can handle this better. Your meditation and deep breathing is not just for those 30 minutes. You
Hmm.
have to implement. So I believe processing your emotions and staying aware and having that intent is very important. And I mean I talk like a mental health expert who's aced, and I talk like a saint, but I think I'm just trying to be better. I do feel I've come a long, long way. I used to be a very
No, but
impulsive
you're
person,
talking
but
from experience, which is the
yeah,
best, which is the most sort of authentic wisdom there is. And intent is so important. I can't believe I'm giving so many gym examples today. But you will hear so many trainers when they're telling you certain exercises. They'll say you must feel the exercise while you're doing it. Your muscles must feel them. So it's really about being present. If you're not present in any endeavor and the intent is missing, it's just consuming time, nothing else.
yeah, absolutely. So well said.
Wonderful. This can go on and on and on, but it's been a fabulous conversation, of which there was absolutely no doubt. It's been a very interesting and important interaction. So, all the best with your future endeavors and your podcast, which is most entertaining while being very, very relevant and important. And take care.
Thank you so much, Karthik. Thank you so much.